G'day, mates, and welcome to the Tool Assisted Podcast. This is your host, the 8-Bit Beast, and today is the 29th of March, 2019. Today we're talking about Ty 2 Bush Rescue for the Game Boy Advance. This is a little bit different from the main series, and it's more like a 2D platformer rather than the 3D collectathon on the GameCube PS2 type of consoles. And we're with Mittenz today, who has recently made a Taz with me helping him a little bit. How are you today, Mittenz?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. So, how did you get into speedrunning, Mittenz? And gaming in general, I suppose.
I've always been interested in gaming, I guess. I had a Game Boy as a kid and played Pokemon like crazy, and then an N64 soon thereafter. So that, and then PS2 during high school was like my big thing. But if you're wondering about speedrunning specifically, like I had known about GDQs, but it was kind of, I had graduated from my undergrad in college just in 2014, and I was like kind of working, but also kind of had a lot of time on my hands. So I ended up going back and checking out speedrunning again and kind of getting started. And the first game I actually ever did a speedrun of was Cubivore. Do you know that game?
I think I did see a speedrun. I've never played it though.
Yeah, it's not a good speed game, but it's a really weird game and like pretty interesting. So,
Well, it's like a puzzle type of game, isn't it?
yeah. So you go around as this creature and you eat smaller creatures or same size creatures, like body parts off of them, and they give you different colors, and you have to combine colors to do certain things, and then you just like progress through the world. It's like, I don't know, it's really slow paced. There's a lot of text and cutscenes and stuff. So and you just move really slow. So that was sort of my entry. And then I quickly stumbled on banjo speedrunning and got involved in that. And then from there, ended up doing some work on disassembling the game and building like a practice ROM and working on script hawk with Isotarge and kind of building up the BK module in that. And that kind of led me into tassing.
Cool. Yeah, so you're leaning more towards science side of stuff in Tazzing rather than RTA these days. And I think a lot of people know you from your RTA career in Banjo-Kazooie as well, with no RBA, the best category, according to some people.
Yeah, I really pushed for more people trying out that category because I like that one a lot. You just go fast the whole time. But yeah, definitely these days, kind of busy with school. So being able to, don't really have a whole lot of time to sit down and do like 2 hours worth of runs. But, I can spend 30 minutes or an hour doing science stuff or tassing. So that's fun. And actually, so funny story, back in middle school with my N64, I got really into using the Game Shark to hack Legend of Zelda, and I started learning all about pointers and stuff. So in some ways, like, I started out in the science stuff and then like kind of forgot about it, or just like got bored with it, and then eventually found my way back. So I think there was always a tendency to go that route.
So you were like making Game Shark codes for Zelda Way.
Yeah, basically, like, it was at a point, it would probably be early 2000s, when like a lot more discovery was going on in that game. So you could go on forums and people would post different things. Like, there's that the plane from, was it Skyfox 64 that's in Zelda, and it'll actually, the R-Wing, yeah, they'll actually like attack you. It's like a enemy. It's really weird, but you can hack that in as any actor in that game, and a lot of like just trying to find actors and replace them and do that type of stuff. So, nothing too productive, but it definitely, like, even at that age was like interesting enough to me. So I would just spend the summer off like in my basement doing that.
Nice. Yeah, it really interests me hearing about doing all the Game Shark codes before we had the good emulation tools. I don't know how people found memory addresses and stuff like that. It's really insane to think about.
Yeah, it's like the Game Shark Pro for N64 was like crazy because you could do like memory searches and stuff, but it was really clanky. Like, it was not as intuitive. And if something was behind a pointer, like there was no way you were ever going to find it.
Even today, it's still pretty difficult.
Yeah, today it's a little bit easier, just because like you get a larger view of like the RAM, and you can maybe pick out some data structures or stuff and look for approximate values for pointers. But definitely back in the day, it was like crazy how people like found those things.
Cool. So, how did you specifically get into TASing? Do you remember what the first TAS you saw was?
The first TAS I saw, I think, was actually like a SM64 TAS, probably. It was probably just on YouTube somewhere. And, you know, it was like crazy because it just like completed the game so fast. And I don't even remember like what category it was, whether it was 16 star or 1 star or what, but it was or 0 star, I guess. I don't know. I don't really remember. I remember like being at a friend's house and seeing it though, and thinking it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's the answer I hear from a lot of people, and you know, I don't remember what the first TAS I saw was either, though. So probably SM64.
Yeah, it just seemed like that one kind of came out at the right time, where it was, you know, YouTube was kind of picking up and kind of those tools, and it was like a crazy enough thing that this 3D game that was like just kind of hard to play was, you know, being performed so optimally with tool assisted speedruns. So I think definitely that one like kind of hit the mark at the right time.
Cool. And so then you got into doing a few published official TASs yourself. Now, I think probably one of the most popular ones is Smash Brothers Break the Targets Board the Platforms for N64 with Isotouch.
Yeah, so Isotouch was nice enough to kind of bring me on with that project, and that was kind of my first foray into a 3D game. And of course, that game's like not 3D, but you still have like the analog controls. So that was a lot of fun to do, and it was like a really good archival project in some ways, because prior to that, all those records had like YouTube videos out of like proving that a task could get those times, but none of the button files were ever released. Like it was like really secretive for some reason. So finally having a release of those, and I have to say there's he goes by KM, and he's working on revising it, and he's actually found some time save on a couple of those levels. And he also has like gotten a lot of the RTA world records and board the platform and break the targets. And yeah, so I'm like, it's really exciting, but like the fact that ISO and I released that like really was like a catalyst for him to like come in and sort of like continue searching even more deeply. And we did indeed like improve several of the records, and we matched all the records, existing records. So we beat or matched most of them. And I think the biggest improvement was on Link Break the Target and on Fox Board the Platforms. Those two were, we found some really big time saves. So it was a fun task.
Yeah, very fast paced and entertaining, I thought. And it'll be interesting to see when the new improvements come in for that. And maybe we'll have to do an episode with all three of you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And then now, from what I understand, you're very passionate about the Game Boy Advance as well, having done Drill Dozer and now Ty 2. So what led you to GBA?
I mean, like I said, my first system was a Game Boy Color, and I played Pokemon Blue like crazy. And then, of course, that evolved into a Game Boy Advance, and I like never really got away from the Game Boy Advance because there's like so many games. Like if you can think of any franchise, it doesn't have to be a gaming franchise. It could be like a TV show or a movie or whatever that came out in the 90s that was geared towards kids. It definitely has a Game Boy Advance game. Which is like, most of them are just shovelware, but it's still kind of interesting to see those games. And, you know, some of those are pretty broken or pretty weird. So those are fun. And then the inputs are really simple because most games only use the D-pad and the A and the B button. And you might have L and R functionality, but it's like pretty simple as far as tasking, to a little bit easier to quote unquote try all the inputs and see what works best. It's not like you have these analog controls like for Smash or other 3D games that there's almost like an infinite number of inputs you could do. I really like that. Feels like you can get a little bit closer to optimal with some of these. The thing I like about 2D2 is like a lot of times I think it's a little bit easier to recognize patterns in movement because a lot of times the geometry, like you see a lot more flat geometry. And so if you have some optimal movement on flat ground, you know basically how to move in that case. Whereas 3D, like it's kind of all over the place. So it's very situational and what you want to do when.
Yeah, like in Banjo-Kazooie, where it's basically impossible to find a flat piece of floor.
Right, or even with Banjo, how the camera rotates behind you, so you basically need like you basically need like a robot to rotate, try every angle for you in order to find the optimal one. It's really weird. Yeah, so I like Game Boy Advance for that reason.
I look forward to the day where we can have powerful enough computers to brute force 3D TASs. That'd be good.
Your quantum computers, all the paths just collapse to the optimal one or something.
Mm-hmm. That's the first thing you do with a quantum computer.
Yeah.
Collapse to the most optimal and entertaining path.
Yes.
Yes.
How do I train my neural network for entertainment for these things?
Play around will still be the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we should move on to talk about this game, actually. As I briefly mentioned before, it's no longer a 3D collectathon on GBA. GBA can't handle that. It's like a 2D platformer with... I don't know exactly how to put it. Like, different levels, but you can choose which order, and, like, almost like RPG elements. You can buy stuff from stores and stuff. Would you agree with that? Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, the RPG for GBA, right?
The 2D RPG action platformer? Yes. Yeah, kind of. No, it's a very interesting game. It's pretty loyal to the 3D material other than being 2D, which is interesting.
It's loyal to the other two dimensions.
Yes, exactly. So, no, it's really interesting. So I have to ask you, since you're Australian, how close did they capture Australia?
No. Well, maybe like rural Australia. Maybe.
There's some city levels.
There is some city levels, you're right. Maybe they'll have an Adelaide level.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, kind of like rural Australia, I guess. I never really think of it as Australia because it's cartoony, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to say. But yeah. Aren't Tasmanian tigers extinct, though? I don't think they captured that very well.
Yeah, they're gone. But I think there's only 2 Tasmanian tigers in the entire game, so...
So they're not quite extinct.
Yeah, actually, I think the story of the first game is that literally, like, all the Tasmanian tigers have disappeared except for Ty. Yeah, so they kind of captured that, I guess.
Maybe it's set in 1932.
Yeah. So it's really interesting though. Chrome Studio, who made the game, recently retweeted an article that was talking about Australian games and how like stereotypical most of them are, and they were saying that they actually like did a decent job of capturing different natural ecosystems in Australia, but then because the publisher was still like this American company, they had like a lot of pushback on like some of the levels to be more like stereotypical. So,
Australians get so mad at like people trying to capture Australia as well. Like that Simpsons episode, I'm always hearing people say the accents were really bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say the only saving grace of the game is that the studio that made it was actually Australian, so...
What's that, Chrome Studios?
Yeah, it was Chrome, and then I think for this port, Half Brick Studios also had some part of it, and I believe they're also an Australian company.
And have they ever replied to your tweets?
Rarely. Chrome occasionally will.
Oh, that's nice.
I think they're not especially proud of their Game Boy Advance ports of the games, unfortunately.
Oh, well, we'll give them more attention, don't worry. So there's a Ty 3 as well on GBA. Was there a Ty 1? I can't remember.
No, Ty 1 did not get a GBA port. So there's Ty 2 and Ty 3. So if you're looking for Ty 1, you're going to be really confused.
Mm. And yeah, Ty 3 physics are a bit different as well, aren't they?
Yeah, so when I started this project, another tasser, the name Namek, he was going to originally co-author this with me because he was looking into Ty 3. He was really interested in doing that game. And he actually discovered like super jumping in that game, which then translated to Ty 2. And some of the physics are like kind of similar, like the super jump thing, obviously. But the main glitch that we sort of used for going fast didn't translate into Ty 3. Like they must have caught it and patched it out. So there's like definitely some differences. And even gameplay wise, you use like the mech suits a lot more in Ty 3, which is unfortunate because they're really slow. So
Stupid mech suits.
yeah, you trying to be cool with their giant robot suits and just making the speed game really slow.
Yeah, what is this, Mega Man X?
Basically.
So if you've seen this Taz, you'll notice that it is not very standard platforming. Ty is like flying all over the screen and doing crazy stuff. Most of this is chalked up to the boosterang technique. I know how to do this because I helped you with the Taz, but I think you have a better understanding of this, Mittens, why it works.
Okay, so basically, so the way you do boosterang, first off, is you're traveling in a direction and you jump, and right before you land, you throw a boomerang against the ground. And what the game essentially does is when you turn around and throw the boomerang, is the game tries and slows you down, and it does it by adding speed in the opposite direction that you're facing. So if you're traveling in the opposite direction that you're facing, the game ends up just speeding you up. And unfortunately, or fortunately, you can chain these like landing boomerang throws into one another. So you can just continue building up more and more speed. And it's I believe it's like 32 subpixels per frame squared that you gain of acceleration. So there's 256 subpixels per pixel. So it's, you can end up going really fast, really quickly. And if you go fast enough, you can clip through walls and whatnot. So that happens a lot in the tasks, and actually made routing that task kind of a challenge.
So this is unbounded. It never stops. Is that right?
I mean, it's let's see, it's a 4-byte integer. So
well, come on.
So yeah, so it's unbounded in the sense that it'd take you like, I think I calculated once and it was like a month to gain that much speed. So
yeah, a month of almost frame perfect boomerang throws.
Right, and then on top of that, the bounding box for the level actually like will stop you. So once you hit the bounding box, you have to do even weirder movement in order to keep up that speed and continue building it. So it would take like even longer. It was a little bit ridiculous. So yeah, you'll never have any need to go that fast.
So essentially unbounded speed.
Yeah.
And clipping through walls, that happens when you're moving more than the width of a tie per frame. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you move 17 pixels per frame, you'll clip. And if it's anything less, you'll just the wall collision will detect it and keep pushing you out. So once that occurs, then you can clip out of bounds and do some other crazy stuff.
And so Ty is 16 pixels wide, right?
Yeah, he is. So it's like most sprites are that 2 to whatever power. So he should be 16.
Cool. And now we both had a lot of fun tazzing the out of bounds movement. So you clip into a wall, you're out of bounds. What happens next, Mittens?
Ooh, so if you're in that landing boomerang throw state, collision doesn't really apply or happen, so you can keep moving. Otherwise, you get stuck in the wall. And when you get stuck in the wall, it's really hard to get unstuck from the wall. The only decent ways of doing it are to jump in a direction and then the very next frame throw your boomerang so that a collision occurs from the jump to push you the opposite direction, and then the boomerang throw cancels the rest of the collisions. So you end up traveling in the opposite direction of the direction that you jumped, and that way you can move. But I think that actually only works well when you're going to the left. If you're going to the right, you actually have to like build up enough speed to like keep going to the right for the most part. There's a few exceptions to that rule. Also, if you're out of bounds, if you're not on the very bottom of the level, when you're doing this, you'll tend to fall still. So it's really hard to translate upwards. You can kind of do it by alternating these collision jumps and the boomerang throws in quick succession, and you get like very little height. Like it might be only like 8 pixels or something, like half a Ty height, or no, it might be 16. It's like half a Ty height because I think he's 32 pixels high. So it's like not very efficient moving upwards out of bounds, but you can move downwards out of bounds pretty easily, and you can, if you have enough speed, you can move through like small barriers pretty quickly. But if you're moving just along the bottom of the level, it's a little bit convoluted.
Yeah, and usually if you're like getting into a really big thick wall, you tend to lose your speed as well, so it's often not worth it.
Yeah, definitely. A really interesting thing happens on that first intro level of the task. So if you actually gain enough speed that you can like clip back in bounds from like the very first clip that we do in the task. But we actually use a collision upwards and right to push us down left, so that we stay out of bounds, and then another collision to get a little bit of speed going to the right. And then we start boomerang throwing to build up speed along the bottom of the level. And then once we get enough, we're able to kind of travel along the bottom of the level and bypass a few of the mini, like the locked room fights that are in that intro level. So like even that little detail, like it's something that like might not seem super impressive just watching the task, like, oh yeah, you're moving out of bounds, but the different types of like collision and movement that are happening then it's pretty extreme. So
yeah, it's one of the more extreme parts of the TAS, and I think, well, I certainly struggle to understand it. I think if it was gonna improve this TAS, I think that would be where it would be. But we did a pretty good job essentially like brute forcing it. Just testing a whole bunch of stuff out of bounds. And I remember there was this one time where we were trying to move upwards out of bounds, and as you said, moving upwards was really hard. And I spent like hours just sitting there brute forcing, trying to get up. I got like half a Ty height up, and it took ages, and couldn't get any further up. Did we ever end up solving that, or did we just go take the long way?
So we did end up kind of solving that, and it's really kind of convoluted because you have to do the collision thing and throw a boomerang, and then right after the boomerang throw, you have to kind of cancel that with another jump to get a little bit of upwards speed, and then another boomerang throw to like cancel collision. And then it's also very dependent on like where the walls and floors and ceilings of the out of bounds areas end. So there's a chance that you'll just like fall out of bounds when you're trying to translate upwards, and it's kind of a pain. So
I think that's what happened to me as well.
Yeah. So that's like pretty easy to do, and so it's the out of bounds movement is definitely like not super well understood still. You can gain like a little bit of an intuitive sense of it, but it's definitely like kind of brute force until we find what we need to find. But the good news is when you move out of bounds, every frame you move 16 pixels per frame, because it only like does the collisions based on Ty's width. So you don't actually have to like build up speed. You just do the collision and you move that fast, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is nice. So it's like a discrete grid rather than a, messy, pixely mess.
Yeah.
So the other technique I think of the two big techniques is boosteranging, as we've talked about, and super jumping. So from what I understand with super jumping, so Ty can do a glide attack. You jump and then you press jump again to glide. And he needs both boomerangs to do this, which causes problems sometimes. But basically, when you glide, you get into this state. Well, super jump is true. That's what Scripthawk says it. And so super jump is true, which means, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this means that gravity is lowered. Is that right?
So gravity is always lowered when you're in the glide state, but normally the first time you glide, the game sets your y velocity to 0. And so what the true bit is saying is that you've already glided once, so it's already set your y velocity to 0. So if you try gliding again during that jump, you'll just it'll cut gravity, but you'll still fall. It won't try and reset your y velocity again.
Yeah. And then you can cancel if you boomerang before you hit the ground, then that super jump thing stays on true. So then when you jump again, it still says true, but you haven't glided yet. So while you're still moving upwards, you can start a glide, and because super jump is true, it doesn't set your y velocity to 0, which means that you get a lower gravity because you're gliding, but you still have that upward speed from the jump, which means that you jump really high. Kind of like a moon kick.
Yeah, basically. It's I think gravity is cut by close to a fourth when you glide. And then because you can't glide right away out of a jump, the very next frame, you have to wait, I think it's 1 frame. So you get a little bit over 3 times the height that you would from a normal jump, which is actually insane. It really breaks the game. Yeah, that's the best description of it is, just setting the bit, and then the bit doesn't get reset. So you're able to take advantage of that 1/4 gravity.
And another side effect of this is when you're gliding, it doesn't check for collision above your head because you wouldn't be moving upwards normally. But in this case, we are moving upwards, so we can clip. Now, this clipping is really complicated. I think you understand this better than I do, Mitten.
Okay, yeah. So with this clipping, like you mentioned, the devs must have not thought you could move upwards while gliding because, well, of course they have that bit that sets your y velocity to 0. So of course you're not going to move upwards. But what ends up happening is once Ty is fully embedded within a wall, the wall counts as a ground collision and it forces you out of the glide. You land on the wall. And so it's not an upwards collision that occurs. It's a ground collision, basically, like a downwards collision. So then you end up getting stuck inside of walls. So you can use that to get out of bounds. But then if a ceiling is narrow enough, you might be able to glide all the way through it, or you might be able to get stuck and then jump out of it right away. So that's used all over the task to kind of open up routing also. So basically between that and the boosterang clips, we can clip vertically, we can clip horizontally. The only direction we can't clip is downwards. So that's kind of a pain. But otherwise, we're, either up or left and right we can clip.
Yeah, and in general, super jump clipping is better than boosterang clipping because you don't have to build up all that speed. It takes quite a while to build up speed with boosterang clipping, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so if you're only gaining 32 subpixels per frame, and then you have to get up to 4,076 subpixels per frame of velocity to clip. It takes a while. That's close to 100 frames or a little bit over 100 frames.
Yeah, and there's another sort of other thing with super jump clipping where you can basically jump off the top of the level and then you come out the bottom. And there's 2 things that could happen here. The camera could snap right down to the bottom and have a massive lag spike, or gradually scroll down to the bottom. In laggy levels, it's better to have the camera snap because the scroll down would be really laggy. But in not laggy levels, it's better to have the camera scroll so you don't get that big lag spike from the snap.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple levels where we sort of do this overflow, and I think both times we end up doing the snap method because the levels are big enough that having the thing scroll takes some time, or it creates too much lag and you lose too many frames. So and that kind of makes sense. If you're on a small level, normally getting to a location on foot might not be faster than causing all these lag, or might be faster than causing all these lag frames just to overflow. Whereas on these larger laggy levels, going from the top down to the bottom instantly is a huge advantage with routing. So kind of later in the task, we use that a lot more than early on.
Yeah, and it's probably more entertaining letting the camera snap as well, because you can actually see Ty for that bit rather than waiting for the camera to scroll down.
Yeah, so actually on one of the levels, it's a level where we have to kill 6 crocodiles as like the objective. And for like the one of the crocs, we do the overflow. And unfortunately, if the croc isn't on screen, it can't die. Like it doesn't take damage. So on that one, we definitely had to snap because otherwise we would be waiting around for the screen scroll to get down to the croc so we could actually kill it, which was like ridiculous. But it definitely adds, I think, to the entertainment of the task.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we got to route some of those into the TAS. I remember I was labbing out like this route for one of the levels, and I'm like, why don't we try and go off the top of the screen and come out the bottom? We timed it, and we were so happy that it got in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy like how much routing was opened up for this game with all these glitches. Even for the RTA run, like world record went down by like 58 minutes by finding these glitches. So it's kind of ridiculous. I think it also helped that we actually like screen grab maps of every single level. And those I think are linked in the task submission text. But it's crazy, like, if you look at how the levels are supposed to be played versus how the task plays them, just, like, the amount of wall clips and sequence breaks and whatnot within each level is absolutely ridiculous. Which is, like, why I'm really grateful that you agreed to, like, co-author with me, because it... Like, when I started this game, I was like, wow, this game's, like, really linear. There's not a whole lot going on. There doesn't seem to be any, like, real glitches or sequence breaks. The only really interesting thing is, like, managing the boomerangs, and trying to keep your boomerangs will be, like, interesting enough. You know, this will, like, I'll be able to whip out this task, like, super quick, and it'll just be, like, a nice, fun little project for the summer. And then in, like, a year later, it's like, okay, we're finally done, and it's absolutely broken, and every level we had to, like, test, like, 7 routes with in order to figure out which route was the best one. So, it's,
I remember, like, it was really good because we could each pick a route and TAS it and then compare the timings. Because usually to compare them, you do have to just TAS them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really good. It's a good game to co-author, definitely.
Yeah, and, like, even just having someone else there to, like, sort of motivate you through some of the more slow-going levels is helpful.
I still had to get you to do the final inputs most of the time, because I'd be like, oh yeah, look, I did this bit, and you'd save heaps of frames.
I think part of that was just, like, how long I'd been tassing this, because it seems like we'd keep finding things as far as the glitches go, and I'd have to go back and start the task from, like, the very first level over and over again. I think I actually ended up doing that intro level, like, 7 or 8 times, like, from the start, because we kept finding stuff.
Yeah, and I'd come into this a lot later than you did, so you got a lot better at optimizing it. But I'm glad I could help with routing and whatnot.
Yeah, no, you were definitely a big help, so...
Probably, I guess, apart from the small, like, I saved some lag frames sometimes, and, you know, occasionally save some frames on jumps that you did. But, like, the main thing that I found for this was skipping text as well, because if a character is about to talk to you, you can pause frame perfectly and skip the text. So that probably saved a bit of time.
Yeah, that definitely did. That was also one of the reasons why I had to go back and do the intro level from the start again. So
sorry about that.
You're good. No, that is awesome that you found that. Like, that would have been so embarrassing had, like, you know, I'd submitted and then you know, the judge is like, hey, did you know that you could pause right before the text comes up and save, like, you know, probably, like, I don't know, several minutes at least, tens of minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it definitely would not have been sub 15 without that find. So that was definitely a good find.
But as far as I remember, there was some weird routing with that pause thing, because so usually to end a level, a character will talk to you, and if you skip that, you don't get the opals for ending the level. Opals are the currency in this game. And then we needed a certain amount, so we weren't sure which ones of those to skip.
Yeah, that was kind of a ridiculous problem, to be honest with you. Um, because so the games normally will like bring up some text and then do this like special fade out whenever you successfully complete the levels, and that text plus fade out normally is longer than just pause exiting or skipping the text and pause exiting. So because we were pause exiting all the levels, we weren't collecting the opals. And so we ended up having to buy one of the mech suits and one of the boomerangs in order to complete the level. And there's like an optimal place in the run to buy them after the second boss. And so we ended up having to like kind of weigh our options of like, would it be worth trying to route in these opals, or would it be better to just skip one of the pause exits and take a little bit time loss exiting one of the levels. So on the Croc Escort mission, we ended up not doing a pause exit, which I think wasted, it wasn't even that many frames. It was like 20 frames, but then that gave us enough opals to buy everything that we needed to buy.
Yeah, and then there was weighing that up against collecting loose opals throughout the levels from killing enemies and stuff, but that ended up being slower doing it that way.
Yeah, and enemies only drop like one opal, whereas whereas like completing the level gives you like several hundred opals. So definitely
pretty clear which choice to take.
Right. And actually this game's weird because if you're doing like 100%, the game, all the levels combined plus like most of the opals along the route don't give you enough money to buy all the boomerangs. So if you were to do 100% tasks of this, a good portion of it would just be farming money, which is like, not a great thing in order to buy all the boomerangs. It's kind of sad.
So when's 100% Tasman?
I think I need a good break from Ty before I get back to that. So.
Come on, you've only done the first level 7 times. Come on.
Well, luckily with that first level, the only thing you have to do is complete it. So that should at least just copy from the any percent task.
No, I'll find some new techniques, then we won't be able to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I remember, like, we were tazzing the last level, and I thought that I had found this new technique that saved a bunch of time on, like, every single jump. It was, like, alternating pressing right and not pressing right if you're at full walking speed. And I was like, oh my god, I found this new technique. And then, like, you were messaging me, like, oh, I've almost finished the final boss.
Oh, no.
Like, oh, no. Luckily, I looked a little bit more into it, and I was wrong. Like, I thought I was breaking the speed cap a little bit, but it turns out that I wasn't. So, you're off the hook this time. I almost made you redo the whole thing.
Actually, so I know on a jump, if you're just doing like a normal jump and you're like the max speed, alternating right and not right, or left and not left, will give you like a slight speed boost. And that was actually something that Namek also had pointed out. So if you go through, there's not a whole lot of times that we use it, because a lot of times we're going faster than that normal max walking speed for jumps. But I believe there are a couple times where I kind of use it to eke out a few subframes here and there. So there are a few spots throughout the task. I know it doesn't work with just walking, though. It has to be in a jump. And like I said, with jumps normally we're moving faster than we're supposed to anyways. So alternating right and forward would just drop our speed to whatever that max walking speed is, which is not what we want. So
maybe that one that you're describing is very similar to what I found. But yeah, when I tested the thing that I found again, I found that alternating was like going a little bit slower. But
interesting. Yeah. There are a few times where the quote unquote velocity and the actual change in position don't quite match. And I don't know exactly why that is, but that might be one of those situations. Because you know how script talk, how we are pulling the velocity data and then we're also pulling the delta X and delta Y from the position?
Delta X is so much better.
Yeah, so delta x is like the true change, and then velocity is good because it lets us know that like if we're up against a wall, we're still gaining speed, you know. So we sort of need both of those, but definitely like the delta x is kind of the true value, and sometimes that won't quite reflect what it says the velocity is doing. Yeah, I don't know.
So there's another technique in here that I still don't understand. You always have to test these bits, but when Ty does like this, so it's sort of like booster ringing in that you're building up speed, but Ty is glide sliding through the air. So how does this one work? It's in a few spots of the Taz.
Okay, so this only works on stationary platforms. And, well, no, I shouldn't say that because I've wanted to work on the ground too. So I take that back. So the way that this one works is you basically have to cancel a glide by landing on a platform. So normally, since glide, you're coming down. If you get close enough to the ground, it will force you to land. But since we have our super jump, we're able to jump upwards using a glide. But then once your feet are close enough to a platform or the ground, it will force you to land. But it doesn't force you to land right on the ground. It forces you to land like on this invisible platform above the ground. And then you'll be in an idle state for a frame, and then you'll start falling to the actual platform. Which is like, it's really hard to kind of explain. But then if you kind of cancel that glide canceling on this invisible platform with a boomerang throw, you're not on a platform, but you're in a landing state with the boomerang. And I just think the game doesn't quite know what the next state to advance you into is, since you're not actually on the ground. So you just keep building up that speed of 32 subpixels per frame squared without having to throw extra boomerangs or anything. So it's a really, really odd one. It's also really difficult to transition out of. So you just kind of travel horizontally left or right at that constant accelerating speed. And to cancel out of it, you either have to get rid of one boomerang and then turn around to face the direction that you're traveling, which then cuts your speed down and you start falling. Or you need to get rid of both boomerangs, and then you can keep your speed and start falling. But the obvious issue there is that you lose both your boomerangs. So there's not like a real clean way of getting out of it. The state also ends if you collide with a wall, since you are kind of like airborne.
Yeah, I remember getting out of that being a pain. And one thing that I don't think we mentioned before is, you really want to hold on to those boomerangs. One for gliding, because you need 2 boomerangs. And also for booster ringing, because, well, you need boomerangs to do that. And if you're booster ringing on, like, a tree branch or something, then when you throw your boomerangs, they go through the branch. So you can't just throw them into the ground and collect them again. You have to, like, really strategically throw them, and it can get quite difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult, especially if you're out of bounds and you're trying to keep your boomerangs, because they just kind of go everywhere. And same thing with platforms. So on platforms, sometimes we'll like throw them against an enemy just so that they rebound fast enough that we can use them again, or we'll throw them against a solid wall that's close to the platform to hopefully they bounce off that quick enough, since like you said, they don't reflect off of platforms, they just go through them. So definitely like the most valuable resource in this game is your boomerangs. And it was like, I guess my intuition of like, oh, this game will be interesting to task, trying to manage your boomerangs and keep both of them, but it like not to the extent that it actually ended up being, which is kind of ridiculous. So for every super jump you need to have both boomerangs with you, and for every boost you need at least one. So very hard to keep those going.
Yeah, and with booster ringing, you have to throw a boomerang like every 7 or 8 frames to keep building up your speed. So you need a lot of them, and you only have 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even even as you're traveling on the ground, depending on your speed, you might have to throw them out in front of you, or if you're going up a hill, you want to throw them out in front of you instead of down, or down in front of you. because even the slopes will affect how the boomerangs kind of bounce and if you're able to recollect them or not. It's very an interesting challenge to say the least.
If only we had analog inputs.
Yeah. There's another interesting thing though is that you can cancel boomerang throws with a jump, and you can cancel a jump with a boomerang throw. So you're not moving every other frame when you do that, but it is a way that if you're on a platform, you can build up a little bit of speed while holding onto your boomerangs.
I really love that method, but yeah, you always used to find better ways to not have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also really good if you're landing and about to throw a boomerang, because sometimes if you're landing on like a ledge, your boomerang will kind of get caught on like the wall part of it, and you won't be able to recollect it, and you won't be able to throw it in front of you and down because you'll lose all your speed. So definitely like throwing down and then canceling it with a jump and then throwing down forward is kind of the way to do those. So there's some clever places that we can kind of implement that.
Good. And there's one more glitch I have in mind. This is like one of my favorite glitches is when you have a level where the goal is basically kill 8 enemies, for example, and there's these 8 enemies all over the level. There's this really good glitch you can do where you can basically get 2 kills at once. And the idea is what you do is you kill the enemies with your boomerangs, but you line it up so that both of your boomerangs hit the enemy on the same frame, and that kills the enemy. And then because both of your boomerangs hit the enemy on the same frame, it actually counts as 2 kills. So you only have to go around to 4 of the 8 enemies of the level, and that opens up routing significantly. You can also improve that because there's this upgrade you can buy called the multi-rang, and that lets you fire, I think, unlimited boomerangs, but you have to space them out a few frames apart. And then you could get, more than 2 kills on the one enemy and make those levels really short. However, with the multi-rang power-up, you can't boost rang, so that's why we didn't end up using that, and the opal requirement and shop visits and stuff. But yeah, I really, really like that glitch.
Yeah, that's a really cool glitch. And the way around the losing your boost would either be, do that level last and buy things the multi-rang right before it, or you can buy the flamerangs, I believe, also let you boost. Like the normal boomerangs. So you could buy both the multi-rang and the flamerangs and then do that. But the way the task currently is, it would not have the time loss of having to go and do a second trip to the shop or having to collect extra opals earlier on would not have accounted for the time loss that we would have had from not doing it. Or the time save in the level is not equal to the time loss from those things. So yeah.
I think even if we could get a multi-rang in there, imagine trying to set up hitting an enemy with 8 boomerangs all on the same frame. That'd be real fun.
Yeah, I kind of imagine the best we could do would be 4 boomerangs, maybe. And even that I think would be a challenge. But with that, you would only kill 2. And the way that level works is there's kind of these 4 quadrants. So it would kind of save 1 quadrant trip for us, but those it doesn't take that long to get between quadrants, so I definitely know it would not be worth it for the task. The funny thing though that you mentioned about this glitch is there's only 3 levels where the objectives kill X number of enemies, and all of them work a little bit different in how they count the points. So the boomerang overlap works for the last of those levels, which is Crouching Koala Hidden Frill is the name of it. An earlier one called Lion Village, we also do a double kill glitch, but the way that one works is points are counted when the enemy despawns, and there's 2 ways of despawning the enemy. You can either watch their death animation or you can get them off screen, and if you do both those on the same frame, they count as double. So on that level, we actually waste a little bit of time hanging out right after we kill the enemies just so that we can get them off frame on the same frame as they despawn. And then the 3rd level is the level where you have to kill 6 crocs. And the issue with that one is that the Crocs, it's another despawn that counts. So their death animation despawns them, and once they despawn, they count as a kill. But the issue is that if you get them off screen, they don't despawn.
Oh.
Yeah, so that one's annoying because in theory it should work the same as the Lion Village one, but it doesn't because they just don't despawn if they go off screen. Yeah, so that one we end up actually having to kill all 6.
Maybe they had a different person program each level.
Yeah, they must have, because it's weird that none of them behaved the same.
Cool. So I think that's all the glitches and techniques that we have to talk about, unless you have any others that you want to cover.
I don't believe so. I think that's everything. There might be some very situational one, but I can't think of what it would be. So
yes, and I won't keep you here for 4 hours to think of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you haven't seen the Ty 2 Taz, it's up on Taz videos right now. And we've actually just submitted it, which leads me to a topic that I've wanted to talk about for a long time. And now that I have the incentive to talk about it, I'm going to. So, I see a lot of people commenting on Taz's on YouTube, for example, saying, "Oh, this is a great Taz." And I love getting all those comments, when I see them on my Taz's, and I'm sure you do too, Mittens.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, there's a bit of a disconnect, I find, because the thing that really matters with the Taz doing well is the ratings on Taz videos. So, yeah, if you're a listener and you have a Taz videos account, probably the best place to comment on the Taz, especially if it hasn't been accepted yet, is to do it in the Taz discussion forum. So, for example, right now for Ty 2, suppose you wanted to give it a yes vote and a good comment. Just suppose you did for some reason. You would look at newer submissions on the Taz videos homepage and then click on it and go discuss this submission. And then you get rating and voting and commenting and whatnot. And yes, of course, I have the incentive to say this now because we've just submitted it and it hasn't been accepted yet. But if you want to support the Taz's that you like, it's always good to go and rate and vote on those Taz's if you enjoyed them or if you didn't. So yeah, I think that's something a lot of people don't know about, is how important the Taz videos ratings are in the success of the Taz. And yeah, it's something I've wanted to talk about for a while on this show, but we haven't been in the situation yet where we've had a Taz that has just been submitted. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's definitely a little bit of a disconnect there, just as far as even navigating, because when you submit a task, you kind of have a submission text and you have a discussion forum that appears, and you can kind of, if we post a video, you can watch it on either of those things, or you even find on the Tasser's YouTube. So I think that sort of those comments of wow, this is a good task or whatnot kind of get distributed throughout, or just kind of go unsaid. But it definitely does help as far as task videos kind of deciding what's a popular task and what tier to put those things in and whatnot. So
yeah, and you'll have a judge on Taz videos, and they generally just look at the feedback on Taz videos to decide whether or not to accept it, and then what kind of tier to put the movie in. So it's always good to do that, especially if you're very passionate about a Taz. Yeah, and the other thing that's really good is that on Taz videos, a lot of Tazers will put a submission text up with their Taz. So for Ty 2, for example, Mittenz has kindly done a very good write-up of all the glitches and stuff. We've talked about a lot, but this includes stuff about individual levels and stuff as well. And, of course, the video of the Taz is in the submission text as well, so that's always good. And then you can see all stuff like re-record counts and when it was submitted, who made the Taz, and lots of good stuff like that. What emulator it was made on, download the button file for the emulator, etc. So it's always good to look on Taz videos.
Yeah, and the other thing with looking on Taz videos under the workbench is that these are like you said, tasks that are waiting to be accepted or judged. And, so you kind of get to see some of these tasks beforehand, and even just following some of the discussions of well, there are frames to save here, and why did you do this? It gives a whole lot more insight into the tasks. So if you're really interested, it's definitely a cool place to hang out and see tasks before they're even published.
And that's the other thing that you can do as well, is look in the forums on Taz videos, and then people would be discussing Tazs that aren't even finished yet. So that's a whole nother level you can go to if you're really interested. And then, of course, bigger communities will have Discord channels and whatnot.
I really like looking at whips in the different discussion forums, because a lot of times if a tasser starts tassing something, posts a whip, like a few months later they might post another whip that's like considerably improved, and seeing that progression is really neat, in my opinion.
Not to mention, if you see a whip and you spot somewhere where they might be able to improve, you can tell them then rather than when they finish the Taz in several months' time.
Yeah. If you notice they weren't doing the pause glitch to skip text.
Well, yeah. Yeah, so I think that wraps up our discussion about Ty 2 and, where to find stuff on Taz videos. It's always good to keep your eye on newer submissions in Taz videos. Lots of good stuff coming in almost every day. So, Mittens, are there any Tazes that you would recommend people watch? Any favorites of yours?
Oh, I mean, I'm obviously a Banjo-Kazooie speedrunner, so the task that Hyper Resonance did of 100% is interesting. I know he's working on an any percent task, which I'm really, really excited for. And that cow guy's doing a low A button press challenge for Banjo-Kazooie, which is actually like ridiculous. Unfortunately, I like that one. You will probably have to join the Banjo Discord. We have like a Banjo tassing channel where like whips are posted, but that one's very, very interesting. All the glitches and techniques he's been using to like save an A press. And Banjo's not traditionally thought of like a very glitch heavy game, but the few that we have, he's definitely making good use of.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of Banjo sciencey stuff, and it blows my mind seeing his videos. So I'm sure it'll blow anyone's mind who's vaguely interested in Banjo at all. There's some crazy stuff in there that isn't useful in normal speedruns, but is in the ABC.
And then the other task that I can think of is I know Gogo's been working on Grunty's Revenge, and you even did a episode on here about it. And I'm really excited for that one because, of course, it's my two loves. It's Banjo and Game Boy Advance, so that's like right up my alley.
Yeah. So when's Banjo Pilot Tasmans?
Oh, God. That was actually one game I looked at right before I started doing Ty, and it was just... I know that there's like a technique for saving time now, but it's very much like follow the track and you just don't lose time. Follow the track and manipulate RNG to get good items. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone's ambitious enough to undergo that project.
Yeah, what a project. And are there any other Tazes on the horizon for you, Mittens, or are you still getting stuff together after Ty 2?
I'm not quite sure. I've been talking with Easy Games 69 because I know he's really big into Game Boy Advance tassing, and we've talked about maybe co-authoring something in the future. But, I'm so fresh off of Ty 2, I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I want to do.
Yeah, and juggling that with your masters and other sciencey game things would be difficult as well.
Yeah, definitely. So,
yeah.
Right now, just kind of probably going to try out a few games and see what sticks.
Don't forget, we can always do Daydream and Davy.
That's true. And there's a script hawk module for it now, so...
Oh, there is. Best game. Oh, cool. So, where can we find you, and where are you most active?
If you're wanting to follow me for speedrun stuff, probably Twitter is best. And I also have my YouTube account that I normally only post like Banjo stuff to or task stuff to. So both those would be good. I don't remember my username off the top of my head, so I'm sure you'll link those in the episode notes.
Yeah, I will.
Perfect.
Cool. And yeah, I think that wraps us up for today. So yeah, Ty 2, be sure to check out the Taz. Rate and vote if you can, or if you liked it or if you didn't like it. Always good to hear feedback. And thanks for coming on, Mittens.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks for making this Taz thanks for me making this Taz with you.
Yeah, thanks for helping me with this. You really did, so I really appreciate that.
I beg to differ, but it was fun anyway.
All right.
Cool. And thanks everyone for listening. Catch you later.
Later.